Sure.
Nobody.
Is he
Or
a Mets
me.
fan or a Yankees fan?
He's a Yankees fan.
Okay, and you're a Mets fan. Okay.
I grew up Mets, Nets, and Jets.
Yes.
Okay.
And he grew up
Islanders.
Yankees. No, I was a Rangers fan.
So-
'Cause
No,
my mother grew up
Islanders.
with all the guys who played.
We
on
should have a
the
string.
Rangers.
You know why they have short names in New York, right?
No, that's what
String.
Why?
It has something to do with intelligence.
We need a
System we're gonna have like these.
How much is the website?
I like the Giants for beating the Patriots twice. Gotta love that.
Madam Mayor, at 6 o'clock, we're live.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Tuesday, October 10th, City Commission work session to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo.
Here,
Vice Mayor Scott Maxwell.
Here.
Commissioner Omari Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Andy Amoroso.
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Here.
if everyone would please rise for the pledge led by Commissioner Robinson.
I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, Herman.
Point of order. All right, updates, future action, direction. We're gonna go into our presentation. City Manager, did you have something to say first? Or do
No,
we
go
wanna
ahead right into Mr. Waters, please.
Mr. Waters?
For the record, William Waters, Community Sustainability Director. This evening is going to be your second review of the proposed EAR-based amendments, evaluation, analysis review of our city comprehensive plan. We talked about it in the more policy and procedural manner several months ago. We're now at the point where we have pretty much finalized a draft document, which we hope to get some feedback from you tonight. Our consultant, Nielsen Zacharias, and her team are here to give you a PowerPoint presentation of the ins and outs of the comp plan, what has been added, what has been edited, and the highlights. And we do anticipate that the comp plan will go to our advisory boards, the Planning and Zoning Board, and the Historic Resource Preservation Board in November, and come to you for the first reading of an ordinance in December. It'll be transmitted to the state for their review, and we hope to have it back by the end of January, early part of February. And so I know that you all have probably much more interesting things to do tonight, so we're going to jump right in. And I'm going to introduce Nilsa, and she will start in her presentation. I think more than likely, it's set up in different sections of presentation. We might want to wait and ask questions as we finish each section.
Okay, thank you. And we shall.
Thank you. Thank you, William. Madam Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Nilsa Zacharias, Principal of NZ Consultants, and with me this evening is Isaac Hoyos, Senior Planner, and Alice Everard, Planner from NZ Consultants. So thank you for having us here. And now I would like to show the first slide. It is. So let's see. As part of the comprehensive plan process, we have had a number of workshops. Two of those workshops with the city boards, the Planning and Zoning Board and the Historical Resource Preservation Board. The first one, the dates are on the screen. And then we had also one workshop with all of you, and this is our second workshop. Just I want to emphasize that all of these workshops are very important because this is an opportunity to exchange ideas, to listen your feedback, to have a dialogue. What are the policies, what are the goals that are shaping your city? So this workshop we take it very seriously and are a very important part of the process. In front of you, you have this document. This is the draft document and includes all the goals, objectives, and policies. And then I just want to emphasize that this document is a result of more than 1 year of work and a great teamwork with all the city departments. Let me just emphasize that everyone here in the city has been extremely professional, very helpful, and very knowledgeable. I especially want to thank William Waters and Community Sustainability Department for all their input and coordination effort throughout this year. And as you see, all the departments have been provide us feedback, input. We work very close with everyone. And also there was a consultant, Kimberly Horn, that they prepared the transportation element. Okay. Let's go back. So I don't know if you recall the first workshop that we had, it was just like a 101 comprehensive plan. So these are just very few slides just to go over one more time why are we doing this and what are we trying to accomplish. So the comprehensive plan, as you saw in the document that you have in front of you, it provides goals, objectives, and policies. And there are a number of elements or chapters. They are like the footprint or the big umbrella that provide the guiding to the city. There is a little bit of delay. So as you saw in the document, there are a number of chapters or elements. Keep in mind, please, that we are creating a new chapter or element, which is the economic development, and we are also providing housing. Housing is already existing, but we are providing the neighborhood, so housing and neighborhood. We, throughout this year of discussion, we realize and we know that it's very important to embrace the concept of this is a city of neighborhoods. So you will see that theme throughout these different chapters of this comprehensive plan. Like I said, this is the goals, objectives, and policies document. When this comes in front of you for the transmittal in December, you will have two documents. One, exactly the same, this is a policy document, and then there will be another document that has the data and analysis. Because the state of Florida, when we transmit this, they want to see, like, it's like the staff report. They want to see the fundamentals, the support that documents with regard to these policies that we are proposing. Again, as a reminder, every 7 years, every local government has the opportunity to open their comp plan and provide updates. You know, used to be that was a mandate, but now it's an opportunity. Why is this important? Because there are community vision objectives that might change. We are also trying to capture new legislation. And so basically this, we've been through each chapter and updated to represent changes in state requirements and trends in the city.
$10.
We also talk quite a bit about sustainability. So the big question is, and this is just to go over previous slide, what is a sustainable community? So everybody talks about that. So we wanted to clarify specifically in terms of Lakewood, what are we aiming for? So we are saying that as a sustainable community is a multimodal transportation, provides for a multimodal transportation network, is compact, walkable, mixed-use patterns of development. So we are also mentioning that sustainable communities provides more density, also provides a number of civic spaces, interconnected open spaces. Basically, a sustainable community will provide for an opportunity to live, work, learn, and play. Also, as I mentioned at the beginning, this update that you have in front of you, we are proposing a new element, economic development. I mean, if we want to be a sustainable city, we need to provide for economic development. And we need also to provide for diversity in housing price and size, and robust educational system, and as Lakewood has, unique identity. In summary, a sustainable community provides for the needs of the current population and also adequate resources that will be available for future generations. I think this graphic summarizes what are we trying to accomplish here. Please remember the comprehensive plan has to be aligned with your zoning code and your site plans. You cannot have a provision on your zoning code that contradicts a policy from your comprehensive plan. All of them need to be aligned and consistent with each other. This is a graphic to show that the concept of sustainable growth is like our big umbrella, and underneath we have all the elements of the comprehensive plan. And again, throughout this process, we emphasize that the city of Lakewood is a city of neighborhoods. That is, I think it's part of the character, the identity of this city, to embrace the neighborhoods. Now I would like to introduce Isaac. We are going to go one by one, the chapters of elements that you have in front of you.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Isaac Hoyos for the record. So, as Nilsa mentioned, you have a lot of elements in the comprehensive plan, so I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible. Particularly, we already have workshops with you, so you are somehow familiar with the document. So, the future land use is basically the main element of the comprehensive plan because it kind of reflects the vision that the city has for its future growth. And in this amendment or these updates, we have incorporated a lot of the initiatives that this commission and the city and the residents have taken in the latest few years and incorporated them into that vision of the future land use element. And I would like to start with the map with the future land use map. Is there a way that we can So basically, this future land use map is already adopted. You guys have adopted this in the past and updated a couple of years before, but it basically reflects that vision of the city. That column in the middle with the reddish color, which is the area between between DC Highway and the FEC railroad track, is the spine of mixed uses that have been adopted for the city. You have another skinny one on Federal Highway, and then you have the downtown area along Lakewood Road, Lucerne, and Lake, which is the core of the city, the old downtown, and it's also an area with mixed uses. And the mixed uses also go west on 10th Avenue North and 6th Avenue South. In 10th Avenue, even go west of 95 into the Park of Commerce and the surrounding areas. So basically, I'm saying that this is the vision for the future, because future growth and higher densities and intensities are only going to occur in these mixed-use areas. And the rest of the city, which is where the neighborhoods are, is basically not untouched, no, but it's let alone, no, because as Nilsa said, this is a city of neighborhoods, and we want to emphasize that and embrace that. There are some, of course, neighborhoods that need stabilization, and we're gonna talk about that later. But in a recent drive-by that we did in the city, we even went to the south area of the city, which near the solar fields, and there is where you see a lot of the more deterioration. You go through the streets, the homes are deteriorated, there's trash in the front yard, the lawns are not maintained on the sidewalk, etc. But all of a sudden, you see one house that is pristine, there's no trash in the front yard, the lawns are maintained, and that happens occasionally here and there. That is a sign of stabilization. And that's something that the city may perfectly embrace and implement additional forms of stabilization. Because once those neighborhoods that are behind are stabilized, then you can talk about a real city of neighborhoods. So as for the goals, objectives, and policies, the focus of the comprehensive plan is in more residential and industrial unemployment and less strict commercial. Diversification of land uses, specifically having a diverse supply of housing stock, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit when we get to housing. And of course, encourage higher density in those areas that are mixed use and redevelopment areas where appropriate. So basically, the next step that the city needs to take is to start implementing these future land uses and the future land use map that you have already approved. As I said, the future land use map, the future land use and the other elements promote a city that is diverse and is a city of neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods are okay, other ones need stabilization, and infill and redevelopment in blighted areas is important, but it's also important that those infill and development projects be respect the character of the areas where they are being proposed or built. And all this is represented in the different policies of the comprehensive plan. So as Nilsa indicated at the beginning, the future land use, transportation, housing, and infrastructure, they go all together in order to accommodate sustainable economic growth. So to sum up, the future land use supports renewable energy, energy efficiency, and greenhouse gas reduction, adoption and implementation of strategies. We promote these issues, promotes labor as a quality residential community and business center in Palm Beach County, which those are a lot of opportunities that the city had to improve and grow. So this completes the what is the concepts behind the future land use element. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Take questions.
Yeah, any questions? Yes, Mayor?
Maybe. I just want to figure out how to formulate it. Two things that kind of jumped out at me. Number one, you said the focus should be, or is being proposed to be, industrial versus commercial. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. That was a little bit of a curveball for me. I'm not sure why.
Ask that question again. I was.
The focus, if you go back a few slides.
I don't think that was the right,
I'm sorry?
I think there was a different interpretation of that, but go ahead.
Oh, can you go back to,
I'm looking for you.
there it is, right there. Up, go forward one, please. It says focus on more residential and industrial than commercial.
The changes,
Than strict commercial, yes.
the changes that are being proposed in this.
So the change is,
Well, we're proposing that we allow more industrial use in the areas where we have industrial. There are some areas that have growing, especially the artisanal industrial district, and we are reducing the amount of commercial, not area, but the percentages of commercial that are allowed in some of the mixed-use district by replacing it with a heavy emphasis on residential uses. We haven't disallowed commercial. We've just changed the percentages of what is encouraged in our mixed-use district from being a emphasis on a higher percentage of commercial, retail, office versus residential. We're flipping that and having a higher emphasis on residential rather than commercial.
okay.
But you can still have commercial.
Yes.
And the second thing that kind of jumped off the page was with respect, and this is just my, these are my words, not something that I'm trying to recreate, but basically you said that there needs to be essentially respectful development, redevelopment, if you will, in some of the blighted neighborhoods that are sensitive to the local conditions. Or is that a suggestion that the redevelopment not be, how do I say this? What is the suggestion? Does that mean more affordable housing? Does that mean, somebody explain that to me.
Well, one of the intentions is to stabilize the neighborhoods. So once you stabilize the neighborhood, you start reducing affordable housing. But this doesn't have anything to do with affordable housing, with the physical character of those neighborhoods. If we want to continue calling this a city of neighborhoods, whatever you do in those redevelopment areas in terms of residential needs to be, let's say, consistent. Not to use the word respectful, but
Well, that was
consistent
my
with
word.
what is in
So
there.
basically, in other words, if it's a single-family neighborhood, the redevelopment should be focused on new single-family homes.
Exactly.
Okay,
And if you have mixed uses,
misunderstood.
then mixed use.
I got you. Thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
And my question was about Dixie Highway. We're going away from commercial and going to focus more on housing on Dixie Highway.
Well, mixed uses. Mixed uses is a concept now that this commission or previous commissions, I don't know, approved. But mixed use is a combination of commercial and residential. And as William just said, the changes that we are doing is just emphasizing a little bit more residential. In order for the commercial to be successful, you need to have clients, you need to have residents. So that's the concept. No, not eliminate commercial, but bring more residents to bring more clientele to.
So you're incentivizing housing on Dixie Highway?
Correct.
Commissioner Marzulli?
Real quick, William, it says the city shall adopt and implement the urban forestry plan to care and manage trees and population. Can you get us a copy of what that looks like?
I'd love to see a copy myself. It appears that it's already been adopted.
Okay, but I don't want to get too far
Yeah.
off, but because it's here, our tree board used to focus on the tree canopy in the city of Lake Worth, and I think that the dais needs to, have some direction that they need to get back on that.
Okay.
And, this document kind of speaks to that, but if we don't know what it looks like, we need to give clear direction to that board that yes, tree canopy, especially now after the hurricanes, we need to start replacing that. But if we don't know what that looks like, we can't give a clear direction. So if it's here, I think we need to try to figure out, if we can get it, or do we need to write something that works for Lake Worth?
Okay.
Thank you.
And we should also have, if I could just add to that too, we really need to have another meeting on what that plan looks like. We had conversations several years back about, the canopy and shade trees and where and when and where those things went. But also we had a discussion, which was one of the things that I brought up, which was about scents. And when we talked about maybe,
Fruit trees.
we talked about setting a scene in motion. I think you did the presentation that one time when we were talking about remembering where you're at when you're at a certain place. When you go to Chattanooga or you go to this city, there's certain trees that are planted that are, or magnolias in one city, or scented aromas that come from another, that there are these things that are built into tree plans that help to make the experience in a city more enjoyable. But just if we can kind of have
Okay.
that plan brought into it so that we're looking at that moving forward too. Commissioner Hardy?
I really only have one question. So I get that the trade-off isn't between commercial and industrial, but commercial and residential, and that residential is what's being used to induce commercial development. But when it comes to emphasizing industrial where it's already occurring, I guess, where did that need come from? I guess if industrial is already occurring in certain places in the city, I guess what's the rationale behind?
We have two areas of industrial. The one that's east of 95 is our artisanal industrial district. It's along the FEC tracks, basically south of 10th Avenue and north of 6th. There's also a small area that we're proposing to expand in the southern part of the city, which most of that area is already industrial. It's just not, its future land use is not industrial. So we're trying to bring one area of the city more into compliance and make it conforming versus non-conforming. And then there's another small area of artisanal industrial in the northern part of the city, west of the FEC tracks, right by the canal. And so part of this is to set the stage to broaden the uses in those areas, and it also will feed into the cultural master plan that's being done as a collaboration among the CRA, the Cultural Council, and the city to use cultural arts in their broadest format as a mechanism for economic development. So we're trying to bring all those things to actually, they support each other and work in harmony.
Thank you.
Would that also be similar to like when there's certain, like can't have kilns in certain areas or breweries in certain areas, but when they extend the artisanal industrial to the commercial area, then they're expanding where those places can go too.
Okay.
And when you said, and one thing I just to specify too, when you said, well, you're using this as an incentive, but you're not disincentivizing commercial on its own.
No.
This is just in addition to and as an incentive.
Right.
Okay. Commissioner Robinson?
I just, do you ever use the phrase housing instead of affordable housing? Do you, when you talk about single-family housing, do you ever refer to that as affordable housing or?
We are going to talk about with the housing and neighborhoods element, and it's one of the main changes that we are doing. But if you allow me to get to that element, I could answer that question.
Okay.
Unless William wants to say something.
Okay. Let's move on to the next category. Thanks.
Okay, so the next element is transportation, and transportation also goes hand in hand with the future land use. And in order to make this the city a livable city, one of the concepts that we are emphasizing is the implementation of the complete street strategies concepts, which the city silently has been implementing. Many streets there, there's on-street parking all over the city. That's one of the concepts of complete street. There are bike packs signalized in many of the streets, secondary and main streets, etc. So it's a concept that may seem controversial, but the city is being little by little implementing those concepts, making fixing the sidewalks, making the city more walkable for the residents, etc. And as a guest of the city at night and during the festivals, I know that that concept is working in the downtown area as well. Bicycle racks, things like that. It's just emphasizing that a little bit more. And that would contribute, of course, to making the city more livable, construction of, in the future, remember, this is future, not present. So in the future, the city may have trolleys, may have more bike paths and trails for the residents. It may build that train station near the CX. I mean, little things that could enhance the character of the city from the transportation perspective. And you just brought some examples either from the city or from neighboring cities of what the city could look like from this perspective in the future. that's an example of some of the things that have been done in the city in terms of transportation. And of course, all that is represented in a lot of maps that are part of the comprehensive plan. I'm not gonna bore you with those maps. And that would take us to the next element, which is housing and neighborhoods. But before that, is there any question on transportation?
Transportation questions? Commissioner Robinson?
The multimodal is in reference to bicycles, right? Are we going to, when does the comprehensive plan address the interest in changing Dixie Highway to 3 lanes?
That's in this section.
I'm sorry?
In this section, it makes a nod to some of the things the city's planning with the neighborhood improvement program that was passed by the bond, as well as other initiatives that have been are being collaborated with the MPO. So it will be referenced in this section. It won't say you have to do it. It opens the door to let it happen.
And makes no recommendation?
Well, we don't have enough data and analysis to make a formal recommendation. What it probably will stay, and that language is still being worked on a little bit, is to emphasize that we evaluate and look at the possibility of making it a 3-lane road, but much of the information that's necessary to make the determination we don't have in hand yet, but it's being worked on. And the comprehensive plan supports that work to be continued.
And budgeted and,
Comprehensive plan does not budget anything.
well, but you're saying you are budgeting to get the information and to study
No, I
it.
didn't say that. I said the plan facilitates allowing it to happen. If we choose to do a study, that will be another discussion with you at some point to find out where that money would come from, if it will be a collaborative effort with Treasure Coast and the MPO, or who might undertake it. This just sets the stage to allow it to happen and support it happening.
Okay.
Basically, the goals, objectives, and policies can set up a path. Many times they just guidance. They don't create programs, no, but they give you guidance and ways to get to the targets that the city has.
Housing and neighborhoods.
Okay, the next element is housing and neighborhoods. This is one where we are making a lot of changes. And as Nilsa said, we have worked closely with the Department of Sustainability, the CRA, and other departments in order to do these updates to the housing and neighborhoods. This map, going too fast. Trying to go fast, but I'm going too fast. There are 20 neighborhoods in the city, and of those 20 neighborhoods, 13 are organized in neighborhood groups. They have their name, they have the organization, they have their president, they have some activities, and they have a joint web page with the presidents of all the organizations that show not only that the city is really today a city of neighborhoods, but that the residents are embracing already that concept. And that's a positive in order to work on neighborhood stabilization and many other programs that the plan is envisioning. And for that reason, we added the word neighborhoods to housing. The majority of housing elements in the different cities and counties are just housing. But for Lake Worth, it made sense to add housing neighborhoods to housing. That would reinforce the concept that the city is a community of neighborhoods. It would promote neighborhood preservation, revitalization, and stabilization. And also the proposed policies set up the path for develop neighborhood planning programs if they are feasible and the neighbors wants to work on them. It's just an opportunity, to plan a little bit more in that stabilization. And they know their neighborhood, they know what are the deficits, and they know what are the positives. So the concept of neighborhood planning makes sense in today's language. It's an old planning concept, but we are suggesting it again because it makes sense to stabilize and cement the city as a city of neighborhoods. And then regarding your question, one of the problems that we have found in the housing element is that was all about affordable housing. How to make programs for affordable housing, how to get funding for affordable housing. But through the analysis, and it was something that the Department of Sustainability already knew, but we confirmed that in the analysis, is that the city is already affordable. 50% of the city is rentals, and the levels of the housing values, no, for those that own the property, the housing values are lower than the workforce housing program values that the county has. Of course, there are neighborhoods, no, closer to the water, they get more expensive, no. But the general aspect of the city is that it's an affordable city already. So the concept was try to filter the myriad of policies calling for affordable housing. If what the city really needs is workforce housing levels, pricing levels, and market rate housing. So we did some modifications to the policies. You need to have affordable housing policies anyway, because those are state requirements, and you eliminate those, and the state is going to tell us, hey, put them back. So they're there, we are reducing them, we are filtering them, but we are adding policies for the city to consider workforce housing and market rate housing. And I think that's the gist of the housing element.
Commissioner Amoroso?
A couple things. Okay, so as we talk about affordable housing, market rates housing, whatever you want to call it, I understand that a lot of the grants, a lot of the funding out there, it has to say affordable housing. They're going after those grants. Is that true?
It's
Because
somewhat
that
true.
seems
There's a
to be
misnomer.
why we call it affordable housing.
Well, why we have altered in the comp plan and introduced the term workforce housing, there are opportunities to provide subsidies and additional monies and grant monies for workforce housing, which allows, I think in some instances, 140% of the median family income in the county, which gets you close to a household income of $100,000. After the census in 2020, it's likely to go up substantially. And that is still in the affordable realm of options for housing, but it is something that Lake Worth desperately needs, is workforce housing for people who have household incomes in that range.
And just to carry on that line, I've met with different people looking to do something in the city, affordable housing, and they're starting at 130,000, 250,000. To me, that's not affordable housing. That doesn't fall into my pay scale, but it falls into, so I think affordable housing looks a lot different depending on who's looking at it. But the way I look at it too is we have a lot of substandard housing. We have over 50% rentals, and I refer to them as not so nice landlords. And the way I look at it is if you give the people somewhere nice to live for $1,300 a month versus substandard housing for $1,300, it would have to help us force those not so nice landlords to step up to the plate and clean up their act. So that's kind of how I look at affordable housing, whatever you want to call it. But again, it looks like something different depending on the developer and who's coming in. And again, $230,000, house to me is not affordable housing, but it does fall into the category. Real quick on a couple other things, I'll bring that up, Herman. On page 17, my page 17, there's a bullet point that says, work with the Indian River County MPO, the Go Line Transit Service, and the neighborhood. I think that
It's Treasure,
came from
it should be
somewhere
Treasure
else.
Coast. We still have some editing to do to the
Okay,
document.
I just
totally
want to
admit.
bring that up. And then moving over real quick, I know other people want to speak to the whole historic piece. I still think that we need to circle back around, depending on, I know we're waiting on some things to come from the state on our historic before we even carry on the conversation up here. And there's some things that I don't know that I'm that comfortable with in the historic, but I think those will change. Like you said, it's a working document. I think some of those might change depending on the outcome that comes back from the state.
Commissioner Robinson?
In terms of affordable housing, workforce housing, do we, I guess in order to have it subsidized, you have to know the income of the area? It used to be a standard of 30%, now people are paying 50% of their income?
It varies by the program, but essentially, it is encouraged that a household does not spend more than 35% of its take-home income on its housing. And so depending on the household income, workforce housing or affordable housing can take different avenues. There are programs that require it to be that the housing be within the range of 66 to 67% of the median family income, which is in the 40s. Some of it requires it to be about half, which is in the 20s. And then subsequently, the rental rates would be commensurate to what their household income, and it's made up through a subsidy, a tax credit, a voucher program, or something else. However, for those programs or developments that apply to be affordable housing, they must document what the income is of their residents and provide that usually as an annual report to the holding entity of the tax credits, as well as the county, who I think administers for essentially the affordable housing program for this, the region, or for at least for Palm Beach County. And so where we, yeah.
So can we I talked to a housing professional, and they suggest using financially feasible housing. Does that fit in? I mean, I think we should just be talking about housing and let the developers talk about their subsidies when they have to meet the income requirements. But to immediately call something affordable housing, we get some reaction that it's not something desirable. And I think it's certainly more desirable than unaffordable housing. So can we just call it housing? And then,
Well, as it mentioned, we do have to have a reference or nod to how the city will address affordable housing per Florida statute, and we have kept that element in. We've also broadened the opportunity and interest in the different types of housing. Condominiums, townhouses, single family, two family, higher end, middle end. And what it does is facilitates for us a mechanism to create maybe some of our own incentive programs to encourage that market rate or slightly above market rate housing that may not be able to make it in Lake Worth without a little bit of assistance. And we're not talking about cash to the developer. It's maybe an incentive from infrastructure improvements they have to make for a project, and then in return, based on the new accounts that are generated for water, sewer, and electric, there can be a credit given to have that project happen. It just sets the stage to have us investigate mechanisms to encourage the broadest array of housing typologies and housing prices as we can.
good.
Yes, I want to thank you for making some of the remarks that you did about how there's basically no difference between affordable housing and market rate housing in Lake Worth in terms of price. Perhaps with things that are coming online, there might be a difference in terms of the quality of the housing that's actually positive. Perhaps there might be a difference in the financing that the developer is able to choose because of the income reporting that goes on. But basically, if there's no difference between affordable and market rate housing, there's no reason necessarily to be skittish about affordable housing in Lake Worth. And in some cases, if you look at, as William just noted, if you look at what affordable housing is, it can actually be accretive to our average income, which can actually help induce more commercial development in the areas in which we need it. So I appreciate you being able to make that, especially the comment about how a lot of the workforce housing income standards are higher than our own market rate housing. And so I think that's certainly a message to us here to be open-minded about the opportunities that workforce housing can present to us, particularly when we look at what can happen with the sustainability bonus incentive program that we have here. So that's it. Just more commentary than question. I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
If I can complement the concepts we added policies calling for workforce housing, and we added policies calling for market-ready housing. But the policies are really broad, and the reason for that is to give the council and the city flexibility in implementing those concepts. The concept of workforce housing has some negative connotations in Palm Beach County because they've been extracting money from or forcing the developers to provide a percentage of their housing for affordable houses. But the statistics, their own statistics are showing that they haven't built a single family home that is affordable. And in 7 years or something of the program, they have only built 700 rental affordable, workforce housing apartments. So the concept is okay. There are many options to implement it. You don't even need to call it affordable or workforce. But once you implement these policies, you have a lot of opportunities, to implement kind of out of the box projects.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Again, I'm a little challenged on how to phrase this. All this discussion back and forth tonight about affordable versus workforce can be confusing and in the messaging. And I believe I heard you say that according to your research, everything in this city is affordable. Is that?
The majority.
Well,
residents,
obviously,
yes.
okay, so virtually everything is affordable.
Mm-hmm.
However, you're saying that the state requires us to reference it in the comp plan.
To have policies addressing affordable housing, if for some reason in the future you need to do it, you have the policies there.
I think what I'm getting at is, because I don't know exactly, I'll be honest with you, I don't know exactly what the state's going to do to us, one way or the other, whether we implement it or not. But at the end of the day, if we don't want any more affordable housing, because it's already been proven that we don't have a shortage of affordable housing,
Not at all. And
why can't we just say, you know what, we don't need an affordable housing component in our comp plan? And at that point, what do you do beyond this conversation that says, look, developer, I don't want your affordable housing. I don't care if you own the land. I don't want any more affordable housing. How do you get to that place?
Well, maybe I should answer that. What we have removed are a number of the incentive vehicles and emphasis on housing that is for lower income and super low income out of the comp plan. We've also removed from the comp plan the emphasis that the city will spend a preponderance of its resources on encouraging affordable housing. What we have replaced it with is that we acknowledge that based on the data and analysis that Lake Worth is effectively an affordable community in Palm Beach County. We want to improve housing options. We want to improve housing quality, and we want to provide mechanisms for a higher degree of diversity in the housing. Some of that housing, by definition, is going to end up being affordable because that is the market that we have here. Keep in mind that under the county's regulations for workforce housing, which does fall under the affordable umbrella, the Lucente townhomes qualify as affordable housing because you can buy a single family home making about $110,000, $100,000. Some of those townhomes were in the upper twos. The D.R. Horton project behind Wayne Acres Ford is considered affordable by county standards because the household income needed to buy that is relatively low. It's high compared to Lake Worth's median family income, but it's low in comparison to the county. And so what we've been trying to do with the comp plan is actually move us toward, please look outside what the direct market is of Lake Worth, which would imply that it's affordable, and build something better or more expensive or a larger range of that to encourage that next level of investor or homeowner to come into the city.
Okay. And the other question I have is just a very simple question. You mentioned at the beginning of this element that there were 20 neighborhoods. We know of the 13 that have defined themselves by, they're becoming nonprofits or being part of the NAPC. How did you determine where the other 7 neighborhoods were and what the boundaries might be?
Yes, because just by mapping them, and then there was a leftover of residential areas that didn't have neighborhoods. But historically, they have a name. or the neighborhood, they may have neighborhood associations, some homeowners associations, and we identify them through the names of those homeowner associations. There's a neighborhood on the other side of 95 near Lake Claire Shores. When you look at the
East
map,
Terrace.
East Terrace, West Terrace.
that one.
Lakeview.
It already has the name, and it has an identifiable boundary, so that is one of the
Okay,
ones.
so it's a little arbitrary but, and subjective, but there was a method to your madness.
Lakeview Terrace.
Exactly.
Commissioner Hardy?
Yeah, I guess what I heard William saying was that basically this comp plan is a victory for people who were skeptical of the previous comp plan's emphasis on affordable housing, perhaps to the exclusion of more diverse housing elements.
Yes.
Okay. All
Well, the
right.
previous comp plan, which we have amended, was essentially a vehicle to have nothing happen in the city.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Amoruso?
My question is gonna be directed to our attorney. So, within our current comp plan and as we move this forward, as long as they fall into the category, we can't stop them from building so-called affordable housing, right? It's up to them what they wanna build, what they wanna charge within our
Correct.
guidelines.
As long as they meet your parameters with site planning and the zoning is correct, you can't tell them exactly what to charge or what to build. It is within their own financial abilities.
Okay, and then.
So in the end,
Okay, thank you. And then, just for the record, I think you've heard it from the dais before, and just like we can't stop them from charging what they want, we really can't stop them from taking it off the tax rolls. However, as we encourage new development and they're looking for benefits and to work with the city, just like I work with the CRA, we constantly say, I'm not really interested in something that takes something off the tax rolls.
And part of this is we have been setting the stage to institute a pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes. That was not a concept that's really in our comp plan now. It is something we're discussing and trying to formalize because we do have some nonprofits who are interested in developing home ownership options. But I've been very adamant to them, we cannot afford to have property coming off the tax roll.
Thank you.
Commissioner Robinson, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
We would have to wait 7 years then.
No, we're making the changes now with this comp plan change.
Vice Mayor?
Pass, thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next category. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is infrastructure, and one of the things that, if I can see that, let me go back. I was pushing this and it went forward too much. But one of the key issues in infrastructure is that we are creating, now you have water, sewer, stormwater, solid waste, etc. You have an electric utility, but you didn't have an element in the comprehensive plan for the electric utility. So we created some concepts there for an electric utility. It's not an element separated because it's part of the infrastructure element, but it's there and you're gonna see it. Is the idea, I think it was reflected in that draft. I don't remember.
It's still in the process of being edited because Mr. Liberty's now here and he's working with us to have it be appropriate to where the direction might be for that utility. And you'll see some additional language when it comes back to you for the hearing on the electric utility portion of the infrastructure section.
But basically, that electric utility element also has incorporated all the programs that the city is taking on, like solar, and the blue ocean energy thing, all that kind of stuff. No? That and policies that were there in the comprehensive plan, in the future land use element and other elements, we move them to that particular element and consolidate everything in there.
Just to comment on the document that you have in front of you.
You know what, just use the microphone, I'm sorry, just real briefly.
On the document that you have in front of you, on page 18 is the new electric utility objectives and policies. It's already part of the document.
Question?
I'm sorry, where were you? Page 18, what?
18.
18 of the infrastructure section.
It has its own objective, okay.
Objective 4.121.
Commissioner Amoruso?
Real quick, so you've been working on this plan a little longer than our new director has been here. I encourage you to just make sure that we talk
That's
to
what I mean.
Ed.
He's come in is just now, and he's in the process of looking at some of the language we have, the levels of service. And that's why I'm saying that when you see it again, it'll probably be a
Some
little
of it will
different.
change and.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that Ed
Mhm.
is fully aware and gives his direction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. The next one is coastal management. Every coastal city in Florida needs to have a coastal management element. And this deals with emergency management and discharges of stormwater, all that kind of stuff. And also is looking into impacts of natural disasters, prevention of development in coastal high hazard areas, and making sure that the insurance rate for the city is in good place by taking the measures and applying to the insurance rate certification program, etc. There's a new regulation that is called Chapter Bill 1098 that has given a little bit of headache to some of the coastal cities because the state is being very strict that every coastal city addresses the concepts in this 1098 bill, which is related to sea level rise and climate change. So the cities need to implement certain provisions that are required in this bill, and we made sure that those provisions are there. And one of the reasons for that is not only because that facilitates the review and less comments from the state, but at the same time, we would have policies and objectives in the coastal management element that would help the city in case that there are problems in the future with sea level rise or climate change. There's a photo there that I think I showed that a picture of that car in water. Is an intersection right here in Lakewood. And that's just the so-called king tide. And those king tides could be exacerbated with surges and stuff like that if they occur at the same time of storms and things like that. It's just important to have these policies and then the appropriate departments to develop provisions and land development regulations that address these situations. And that's basically the gist of the coastal management element.
Commissioner Amoruso?
Real quick, I was looking for the city manager, but I think he stepped out. So I'll direct it towards William. William, some of the elements that we're doing in the city of Lake Worth along our coastlines, and then to hop back into the last one where it says, the city shall protect and improve water quality that discharges into Lake Lagoon. Everything that's going on from the West community, I think we need to take advantage of everything that we're doing here, all the good things, the water quality, everything we're doing. And I don't know whether a white paper or some kind of documentation from the city of Lake Worth that, praises what we've done, that we can actually get out there, because I think we've done some great things in the city, working with Palm Beach County and the water management, but I don't know that people know why we've done this or why we're doing it and what effects it has to the coastal shoreline, also for, sea rise level and everything. I think we need to put something out there about everything that the city of Lake Worth is doing.
I don't know if it would have gone that far, but we do have a consultant on board now, CRS Consulting, who's going to help us maybe achieve a higher rating for FEMA insurance. And some of that, to get the next rating, is some of the things that are mentioned in the comp plan and some of the activities you're talking about, which would include a active marketing of those things to the public. I'm sure that could be broadened to include some of the other things that may not be directly related to flooding or what's required from FEMA. And so we can work with Ben and the various departments, which will be water, sewer, and actually stormwater, which is all under Brian, to see how about doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The next element that I'm gonna be presenting is conservation, and the city has done, one of the things that the city has done actually is to work seriously in the few conservation areas that the city has, and most of them are located right there at in the golf course and in the coastal waterway. That way. That's a view that you have. There's a walkway. There's not a lot of natural areas in the city, but whatever you have, you're already taking care of them. And that's something that can also be part of that program to enhance more the insurance ratings and things like that.
Right.
And this element also, we added a reference to the urban forestry management plan, which is part of increasing the air quality of the city and things like that. If you have more trees, etc. In our research, we found that a forestry management plan was approved by, I don't know if this commissioned by the commission in 2015. And we already took note of that, and we will like to present that to you.
Yeah, that was us.
And that's it about conservation. Any questions?
Yes, William, if you could for me, please, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Under objective 611, policy 6113, if you could talk about, or at least, I mean, could you just talk about the clause encouraging mixed uses within the CRA to limit the number of vehicle trips and encouraging mass transit? Can you talk about the relationship between parking and the ability to achieve those objectives there?
Well, one of the concepts that is evolving, especially in the coastal areas of South Florida, is trying to encourage the live, work, play, and learn component to be in a centralized location to reduce the necessity for cars and those associated trips during the day. One of the things we are challenged with is that there's a perception that we have a lack of parking, but we also have a lack of the services that people need in order to conduct their daily lives. So one of the goals is to have enough residential to create a market for the other uses so that we can actually hopefully walk, ride a bike, ride a trolley, utilize the train service as it evolves in South Florida and is implemented versus having to be dependent on a car.
Okay. Thank you.
But there's no disincentives for people that have, I mean, until we have those things in place, like we got funded for trolleys, but we can't have trolleys till we have an operator or
Right.
an operation system to do it. We've got other things, but I mean, until we get those things, there's no interactive. I know there've been talks with our bus routes
Yeah,
and
we're
things
still on top.
of changing that, but we don't have any citywide buses that
Right.
go from place to place. We have a lot of people that don't have cars or rely upon public transportation, but we don't have any of the more convenient choices of more advanced metropolitan areas. And some of those things would make it a heck of a lot easier for people to decide not to use their vehicle and take public transportation, but it doesn't discourage the use or the parking of such until we have solutions for them to take, does it?
No, the level of service study as well as our land development regulations right now basically rely on the fact that as you bring on new development, you've got to provide sufficient parking for that. As things move forward and maybe somebody would propose a project that had a reduced level of parking, we would require a subsequent documentation as to why they came to that conclusion. We've already had a couple of developers submit papers that, oh, the parking requirement you have for this type of development may be a little excessive. And so they got a reduction in the overall parking count. And as far as I know from right now, those projects have not suffered in their viability and marketability in the city.
Okay, and then in addition to that, though, the fact is that we're still building a community where that'll have more tourism from outside areas too. We don't wanna eliminate the fact that we need parking so desperately in the downtown.
Well, and also recognize that many tourists that come to South Florida are from Europe, South America. Many of them are used to traveling where there is no car. They don't have a car, and they are often a bit dismayed that our public transportation system is what it is. Hopefully, as we move forward, and there's an item called intergovernmental coordination, as we demonstrate to the powers that be, the regional planning entity, the county, Palmatran, that we have this avenue of sustainable development that is envisioned for Lake Worth. They will go ahead and put in their comprehensive plan or master plans or visioning plans what would be the next step in terms of mass transit, whether it would be greater mass transit, rapid rail, a rapid bus. There are different options that are coming about. There's also the whole idea of shared vehicles, that a vehicle on demand that kind of floats around, and you push a button or make a phone call, and the car shows up and then takes you someplace, and you return it back to where it comes from. It may sound kind of far-fetched, but we're not that far away, because keep in mind our comp plan is envisioning what and how the city will look by 2040. We do review it every 7 years, but we're looking at a 20-year window of vision. And I think that the transportation environment and lay of the land of how we get around will be substantially different even in 5 years from now.
I just wanted to follow that up with the fact that when I go to other communities for different events and lectures and meetings, because we're billing ourselves as this renewable energy type of city that we have, there are so many options governmentally standing and funding wise to do different projects. And as I look at other cities that have done light rail, and imagine if you had a trolley like system, or a light rail like system going down the middle of Dixie Highway, through things. I mean, that's what other cities are doing. They're having different. They have, like I mentioned Chattanooga before. They have these electric buses that were put out probably in the late 80s, early 90s, that they're still running these things until they die. They're going to be running those buses and stuff till they have. I mean, are there ways for us to use, our brand as a renewable city to get some of these opportunities for different types of transportation options funded in our city as a trial? These other people were the...
Definitely. And what's one of the consensus items that we stressed in working among the various departments, we want to ensure the comp plan has in it and reflects what each of the departments of the city are working on, that they are in harmony and not in conflict, to set the stage that we can actually be a very strong competitor for an opportunity like that. We are not we directly, but there are other entities that have won grant awards to study the TOD aspects of Lake Worth. We were the example used to a study from South Florida. I forget, remember the entity, but how would transportation and TOD, transportation or development, evolve in a city? And we were the example that they used and studied. What would be the economic return? How many people might come in? And so having this, I definitely think that we could be a partner with another entity to bring those kinds of things about. The Blue Wave or Blue Ocean thing is a perfect example. That's a multiple organization agreement and initiative and partnership to bring a study to the city. It is highly likely that other types of things could be feasible and would be supported by the comp plan changes.
Commissioner Russo?
Just emphasize on parking, and I think we need more than we may think we need, only because we're struggling to clean up some of the problems from the past. For instance, the building next to the Gulfstream that has very little parking. The building we looked at today, 21 units, 21 parking spots. The people today, you usually have two vehicles, at least two vehicles. So I still think that, parking needs to be on the table, and it needs to be a conversation. And then as far as conservation, don't forget our wonderful drinking water. This is like a number 7. It's better than most bottled waters out there with our reverse osmosis. So we need to make sure that we, talk about that too.
Commissioner Hardy?
What are some of the things that we can do as a city, I guess, to make ourselves competitive for some of those initiatives or incentives that were discussed here with mass transit?
Well, it's being open and at the table, and that's already sort of begun.
Okay.
I think the city made great inroads in being at the table when we were working toward getting the baseball activity west of the city. We've spent, I know that the mayor has been very active as well as the other commissioners. You're fairly new to this, but we have aggressively reached out and wanted to be included as a player. Our interest and viewpoints have been included. We've also put our nose in where it hasn't been in before, the Regional Planning Council, the Mayor's Commission that I think you were on, Mayor Trio, that was having the various cities on the Eastern Core talking among each other, that if a project were to come in and it may not fit there, don't forget that it can support you if it's in Lake Worth. And that has been, I think, very a productive step. For a long time, Lake Worth was an island and we tried to do everything on our own. And much of the money that's needed to bring a trolley or to bring investment is not already here in Lake Worth. It's going to come from the outside. So as long as the outside knows we're open for business and that we can work with the staff and the commission, it will happen. It probably doesn't happen as fast as all of us would like, but it is happening.
Are there things inherent to the city that make us more competitive?
We have a already ingrained urban design and grid that's very supportive of walkability, bicycle riding, and then our major thoroughfares are very well established. The city is very identifiable as to where those corridors might be. I think that improving Boutwell Road on the western side connects 10th Avenue to Lake Worth Road, which that connection is not there. There's some other connection items that might come along in the future. Lake Osborne Drive probably needs to be better connected or accessible, and it's not. We have been at the table working with Florida Department of Transportation in the improvements on 6th Avenue South and 10th Avenue North, specifically to try to address the walkability to schools. We have a middle school where kids are crossing 95 and also walking up a street that has no sidewalk. Those are being addressed. As we lay the groundwork for the neighborhood improvement program and people can see where our vision of a complete street is going to come, we can then map out and look at where those transit routes might be. And again, having an adopted comp plan that shows where we feel our densities are going to be located, Palm, Tran, or other entities can study, I think that by this point, trigger point, we need to already have in the 5-year plan a new trolley route envisioned for a specific location. Because by that point, Lake Worth will have this many people that are likely to ride it living on Dixie Highway.
So I just heard you say that density is a determinant of our competitiveness.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
I just, in terms of your energy future, could we challenge ourselves to have electric car fleet and any funding for that outside the city? If we,
you're getting in areas where I'm not an expert, because I'm not an expert about everything, but there are likely entities that could help support either a natural gas fleet, because we have a high pressure natural gas line out by the generation plant, or electric system, or even something we haven't thought about already. There's hydrogen cell cars. There are other things that might come about, and I don't see why we could not, since we're so small geographically. It isn't like you're having to buy 200 cars. You could see if it could work, because we may only have to have 5 or 10.
All right, let's keep it to the comp plan here. We're going off in La La Land. Commissioner Amoruso.
Real quick, for the new
I
commissioners,
like the talk.
real quick, can you talk about the future of transit and what it looks like briefly at Tri-Rail, and then some of the conversations we had at 10th Avenue, because that's farther down the line,
Right.
but we're still planning for it now.
There's still the desire to have the Coastal Link, which is the intra-city train service on the FEC tracks that is now feasible or allowable since the dual tracking for Brightline, which serves Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, and eventually Orlando, possibly even over to Tampa. There is a goal. There's appeared to be funding to help get it started. It's just the funding mechanism to run it and subsidize it isn't quite there. So we, 5 years ago, identified where we'd like to see our train stations located. One is at Lake Avenue and the FEC tracks, one's at 10th Avenue North, and one's generally in the vicinity of 11th Avenue South. And they're tier 1, 2, and 3. Those areas have been identified as TOD nodes where we would like to see higher density intensity to support the station being there. And that type of train would have more frequent stops and serve our citizens and residents getting to West Palm or getting south to Delray Beach or possibly on to Lauderdale. The Tri-Rail will always serve as the intermediate mass transit because Brightline only has 3 stops and it's high speed. Tri-Rail is high speed, but it has a lot of stops on it. There is an interest in moving more cargo to the CSX tracks to free up capacity on the FEC line. Our Tri-Rail station is the busiest one in Palm Beach County. And if you've been here for a little while, you'll notice that many cities have encouraged a great deal of redevelopment around the stations. I can think of Bocas and Delray at one point. There was just a station sitting there. There was nothing around it. Our station effectively looks the same as it did when I moved here 25 years ago. And we are hoping that the comp plan will set the stage to have higher densities and intensities near that train station, which would facilitate people being able to live and work here, possibly work somewhere else, and not have to depend on a car.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardy?
Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm familiar with it. My point was to hope to get us to recognize that there's a tension between some of our conservation goals and some of, for example, our policies around parking and things of that nature. In particular around areas, for example, around the Tri-Rail, not just in this area, but also in the Tri-Rail, the actual Tri-Rail, not the Coastal Link. So that was, I guess my point. We want greater density. Parking spaces are an enemy to density. Every square foot that you spend on a parking space is a square foot that you could spend on a unit of housing. That was, I guess, my point. So,
but parking options and parking the cars are evolving quickly. The traditional parking garage is likely not to stay looking like the traditional parking garage forever. Mm-hmm. And so we have allowed and are open to creative means for parking and of thinking out of the box on how we actually park cars. And most cities are having to do that because it's an inordinate amount of structure to be built to store cars.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's go.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. At the beginning of the presentation, we said that we are embracing the concept of a city where we can work, we can live, and very importantly, we can play. So here we are, recreation and open space. As we mentioned, as part of this process, we have put together, working with the GIS department, working with SWAM, Leisure Service Department, put together this map showing the different active and passive parks and open spaces. You have a total of 211 and 69 acres of green areas, including the golf course, of course. Let me just show you again this map so you can look at it. As you notice, there are 2 different types of parks also, and we are going to talk more about it. There are community parks also, and there are neighborhood parks. One of the things that the comp plan is promoting and supporting is to create more neighborhood parks. Neighborhood parks, they don't need to be large parks. They can be a small acreage dedicated. It could be just, for example, an empty lot. It could be, it doesn't need, but it's a place where people can walk from the neighborhood. It could be just a tot lot. But if you look at the map, we are encouraging to have smaller neighborhood parks on the different neighborhoods. And that's one of the things when we do the neighborhood plans, that's one of the things that we can work with the neighborhood, we can identify potential areas. Yes?
Commissioner Hardy?
On the active passive distinction, this is something that's kind of bitten me in my neighborhood, and I'll just give you an example. There are some kids who live in an apartment complex near where I live, and they have one patch of grass, okay? And in this patch of grass, they decide to play soccer, okay? So what happens to that patch of grass over time? It turns into the patch of dirt, right? And so basically, the owner of the apartment complex puts up fences around the grass, and makes playing soccer now a subversive activity. Okay, so I have a problem with that. Not with what the apartment owner is behaving rationally, but I have a problem with the fact that there's basically not a space in our neighborhood, not necessarily for people to go and hang out or what have you, but for kids to actually do things. And the passive parks don't let kids, have a little fenced-in area to play soccer in a. I mean, literally, you could play soccer in a room half this size if you really wanted to, right? And so I'm wondering, can we change some of that? Can we have more active play areas in neighborhoods? Because that's what I see as needed.
We've been talking for a couple of years about a formal open space recreation master plan. And the comprehensive plan sets the stage at the upper level to facilitate doing that plan and creating a mechanism whereby how we pay for those parks, how are they maintained, the regulations that need to be in place so that we don't have a field worn out before and then have to replace all the grass. Juan and his team, Lauren, have been very active in putting the ideas together, what we need to have in that plan. And then hopefully in the next year or two, we will come back with you with that document, which then will then be facilitated in the development process to ensure that we have the appropriate open space and recreational opportunities for the new residents who are coming to Lake Worth.
I would certainly love to see a plan
Yes,
like that.
there is a policy specifically in this element that is calling for that master plan. So
yes,
we
okay.
are recommending that.
As a former soccer player, we need more soccer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know you missed your baseball. Commissioner Robinson.
Well, would you please put the map back up?
I don't know.
Well, anyhow,
So there it
interesting.
is. Yes.
Bryant Park is number 10 there, and is listed as a passive park. I know that we do need soccer fields. It's, I guess, it looks like the largest park in the city. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be possible to have some area of Bryant Park active. I know that there are residents of Bryant Park that consider it too active already, but we do need recreation area.
Well, I don't mean to throw the school board under the bus, but we do need to have, over time, a very concerted discussion. Much of the land available that could be open space recreation falls on school board property, which after school closes can't be used. It's got a gigantic fence all around it. There are opportunities there that if we could figure out how to manage it better and have a partnership with them that would allow the small areas of grass that Commissioner Hardy was mentioning at the various elementary schools to be used for activities. You've got the middle school. There's a lot of green space around the middle school. There's a lot of green space that's not ours, but is the high school. We have John Prince Park that is gigantic, and we don't have a way to get kids there. And granted, maybe a little far for those children to get to that space, but if we can go through the open space master plan and look at how we can involve the leisure services activities, it's not impossible to try to utilize and maximize the potential of all those different resources.
And look, to growing up as a kid, we used the schools. I mean, you would be on a team and you'd go to this school or that school. And even if it was a town program, and it wasn't a school program, you were still using the school fields to do so. So that's number one. Number two, West Palm Beach does a great job with South Olive Elementary School. I mean, they've got a hugely active soccer program there with young kids, older teams playing till 10
They were
o'clock
playing when
at
I
night.
drove by tonight.
Yeah, they're playing till 10 o'clock at night. I saw them the other night. And then they've got the parks there, but they also planned it in a way. They've got the skateboard park over there. They've got the South Olive Park, the water park, and then residents, playing in organized teams, in there. How did that?
I think the master plan that is proposed to be prepared for parks and open space,
Will be a
it
part of that.
will have to explore all those different opportunities.
Okay, excellent. Commissioner Emerson?
Mayor, I know you lead a group with the schools and the different, I think that's a great thing to put on your agenda to have that conversation. And then William, I like the idea that you brought up funding. In the past, we have done a lot of things, not necessarily this dais, but in the past, the city has done a lot of things where there was not funding included, and then we've had to shuffle to find funding. You know, I'm all for pocket parks, community space, gardens, but there needs to be a real conversation about how to maintain them. Because, you know, 6 months down the road, people get tired of it, and again, you know, funding and maintenance. So thank you.
Commissioner Robinson?
When do you propose having this study on recreational areas?
I'm hoping I'm not leading it, to be perfectly honest. I'm sure my department will be involved. We can get back to you on that either through the commission, city manager's report to you next Tuesday, but it is being discussed. I do not know or recall whether there's any money in this year's fiscal year budget to address that. I don't believe so. The groundwork can possibly be started, but then it'll probably be sometime next year. We'll get to it.
So I would just like to emphasize that we have a recreation department or a recreation board that isn't meeting, and it sounds like it would be an important input that community could be involved with. If they had a date and a meeting rather than not. And another, we don't want to plan on the city, but Public Works has a lot of unutilized space across from school property that's not being used. And in the map, I don't know even if that is accessible in the northwest corner of Lake Worth.
It's not really accessible, but it does serve as passive area.
It's passive, so it's not accessible by any means.
Well, there's two roads in at it. I mean,
Where?
Okay, so anyhow, so do we have a policy that parks can be put to other use?
not directly.
Well, I think we should address all this kids in the, folks, kids in the recreational policy conversation.
Yes.
But if you all want to touch on it, that's fine. But then,
Continue with the presentation.
Commissioner Hardy had a question first.
I'll just piggyback off of what Herman said. You know, when you talk about that 12-acre parcel up there by the water, people might be playing there, but it might not be children, depending on who you're talking to. But my
Back to the map.
The map? Okay.
my point is, I get that there are lots of opportunities for collaboration with the school district, especially given that we have community schools, and where I grew up in Broward County, community schools were open, open to the public, and it doesn't seem to be the same way here. So I get that we can get a lot more collaboration, but I don't view collaboration with the school district as a substitute for more active play areas in neighborhoods, especially being, as you mentioned, that we have issues getting kids to some of these locations. So I want to really encourage us to think about how to get more active play areas, even if it's just, for example, near my house, I think 3rd or 4th Avenue North and A Street. There's a little area that's passive. It's like the size of a house lot, right? And it's literally a slide and like some steps and a bench, and no child goes there to play, right? But if we literally put just some rubber turf and some lines on the ground, we now have an area where kids around the neighborhood who are feeling guilty because they're playing soccer in their apartment complex can just walk down the street and go. But it's not designated active. So I really want us to encourage some thinking around there.
No, just having the parks identified.
That's Tropical Ridge.
Just because it's identified as passive or active on the map that's there does not preclude it from being altered from active to passive or passive to active.
Okay.
And I think like for me, when I mentioned growing up as a kid, you played at the schools and you did in Broward.
Yeah.
But the difference was that when I was growing up, the towns and cities were responsible for the schools. It wasn't a countywide system that did it. So your town was supplying the needs of having the ball fields for the kids because they were supplying 2 needs.
Right.
Not just that. But anyway, okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Would you like to go?
Okay, we are going to continue with the presentation. So basically, this comprehensive plan, these goals, objectives, and policies are really embracing and supporting to increase the number of green areas, open space. To go through the policies is very much encouraging. So we are just saying, also we are recognizing trails, greenways, blueways that are component of the overall parks and recreation system. Blueways are very important, so we included some policies with regard to blueways too. It's on the last stage of the recreation and open space element. And so anytime that we talk about recreation and open space, we always talk about the population that we are serving now and the future population. So it's important, as the city grows, we need to think about providing additional green areas. The next element is intergovernmental coordination. Do you have any more question about green open space? Or?
I just want to note,
Commissioner Hardy?
if I may, thank you, that turning unpaved roads into linear parks as quickly as possible might help us achieve some of this, adding green space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agreed. We try to do that for years. We got how many? 5?
Yeah.
5? I think we're up to 5 now.
As we approach the penny sales tax conversation on the 28th of November.
There you go. Precursor. Okay, good.
Intergovernmental coordination is a very important element because we as a city, we don't act alone. We need to interact, we need to coordinate with Palm Beach County, with other agencies, Treasure Cove Regional Council, you know, the state, so the NPO, the school board, so it's extremely important. So this element has a number of policies that support all that process of how do we interact, how do we coordinate with the other agencies. And for example, we are having a slide with regard to the iPark. I'm sure you are familiar with iPark. Anytime that you are changing your future land use, that you are making an amendment to the comprehensive plan, you need to transmit it to the iPark. Acts as the clearinghouse that they transmit to all the other municipalities. So when we talk about transportation, as William mentioned already, we talk about PalmTran, Tri-Rail, South Florida Regional Transportation Authority. Is the intergovernmental coordination chapter of the comprehensive plan really provides you like a baseline how to achieve many of the goals that you are targeting. I mean, there was already a lot of discussion how important it is to interact with the school board. I mean, if the city develops a closer coordination with the school board, you can increase your open space also. I mean, I think it's critical to really open it up to further coordinate with the different agencies.
Commissioner Robinson?
I don't know, is this when we talk about annexation and cooperation with other, or not?
We might get that at the end because the annexation is sort of in more than one area.
Is it when we talk about the school board having a seat on planning and zoning when the schools are affected?
There is one element that is a public school, that is the next element, we can talk about that.
Good.
The next element is capital improvements. The city has already go over the capital improvement. I mean, you have a schedule. There are many capital projects coming through the pipeline, you know, and so it's all about, you know, providing capital improvement and level of service and density. All of that needs to go together. Because if we say in our future land use element or chapter that we are increasing, you know, density, so we need to provide for the infrastructure, we need to provide in our capital improvement. So everything has to be consistent and has to be aligned. So I don't know if you have any question with regard to capital improvements.
Commissioner Amoruso?
The page 9, it looks like the schedule of improvements, it's completely gone, but it was for 2009 through 2014. Will we be replacing that with an
Yes.
updated list?
On the next page, the one that you just turned,
I can't see that.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. We are editing that page
Okay.
to actually enlarge.
Okay, yeah, because if this one is clearly visible and I can read that from 2009 to 14, I'd like it to be just
There's
as
a new
visible.
one coming.
Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Robinson? No. Okay,
Public schools.
please continue, thanks.
Okay, thank you. The next slide, public school facilities. What I really would like to clarify this, when we already did a workshop with the boards, the Planning and Zoning Board and the Historical Preservation Board, we gathered many ideas and also concerns of the different boards. So they really, there was a large discussion with regard to how important is education. I mean, if we talk about economic development, I mean, we really need to emphasize education. So, just to clarify also, the Florida statutes, the public school facilities is actually an optional element. It's not a required element by Florida statutes. So, what we decided to do after gathering input from the boards, we decided to name this element the education element, because we understand how important is for the city education and not just public schools. So we the slide that you are seeing and the document that you have in front of you was the same document that we presented to the boards. So after that presentation and after we gather all your comments, you will see on the final document, we have changed the name. We are proposing to change the name from public school facilities to the education element. So let me just, one of the large discussions that was on the board is how important is the, how important is to coordinate with the public school for the open space to actually increase the, the rating from, right now the rating is low, so we want to increase it higher. So how important is the relationship with the school board? So these are some of the, some of the policies that you will read on your document, such as ensure efficient school capacity to meet level of service standards, coordinate with Palm Beach County School Board for school planning consistent with interlocal agreement. Let's talk about that interlocal agreement. I think you had a question before that with regard to this interlocal agreement. And our attorney has revised that agreement, and then and also you had approved as a resolution already to sign that agreement. Okay.
Did someone turn the air off?
Yes, it's broken.
It's broken?
They're having trouble with the chiller, so.
Just making sure it wasn't me.
It's Herman too, he's sweating.
If you have any questions before we go to the next element.
No, I just want to make record, next Tuesday we have our, the Mayor's Education Council. So I wanted to make sure that we add that, Mike, if we could, to the part of the presentation that we're gonna make.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, one of the other things, I'd like to, if I could have that legislation, that would be great, so I can read that over, maybe talk with you first.
Sure.
About it, and then also, I don't know if we mentioned before about ball fields and stuff, I'm just kinda going back to that in my mind. That's a conversation that we can have with the superintendent of schools, to talk about how do we make those fields available, all the success of other communities that have town-run systems or city-run systems is that they have access to those, is that something that we can have a conversation about? Or is that, am I out in far, in la la land on that one?
No, I think there's the opportunity to work with the schools. I don't know that they have a policy of not using them. I think there's obviously issues of liability and keeping clean. For example, we're working with them on using the community using the swimming pool at the high school, so it's not impossible.
Okay. Commissioner
One-
Marceau?
And I totally agree that we need to reach out to the schools, but is this being done anywhere else in Palm Beach County? Okay.
Everywhere else.
Okay, so my next question would be, in this document, there's one page. It looks like everything else has been scratched out. We need to figure out what everybody else is doing and implement it into here
Well,
because,
as Nielsen mentioned, the section is being changed to education. And I want to reemphasize what she stated. It's not just about the public school system. We want to emphasize in the comp plan educational opportunities along the whole array of opportunities for our residents. Getting skilled labor is a challenge.
Yeah.
How can we collaborate or support the Palm Beach Community College to have options? That type of thing will be in this section. We're not talking about financial support, but supporting them if they want to do a job training exercise, or having some of our residents. We have a very low college education rate. Getting a GED or going on to higher education. What can we work collaboratively with to improve the education of our whole city? And that's more the emphasis than just public school facilities.
well,
Do you have something to add?
I'd like to make a few clarifications. The interlocal agreement that you sign has a provision for working with the school district in the collocation of parks and schools. So there is a provision there. There is a provision, I think, in this document that you have that allows for conversations now with the school district to collocate schools. And Commissioner Amoroso asked if that is happening. It's happening all over the place. And there are, of course, liability problems and things like that, but those situations have been worked out now between the cities and the school district, and hasn't been any problem. Regarding the question of Commissioner Robinson earlier about the school district having a person sitting in the dais is a person with no vote, but they can provide comments, etc. That basically, of course, the school district doesn't have people in the staff to have a person in every single council and commission in Palm Beach County, but they are familiar through IPARC with all the different projects and amendments that are happening to the comprehensive plans, and when they see that there is something of interest to them, they attend the meeting. No? Just for your information.
Commissioner Robinson?
Uh,
Sorry, you had a follow-up, and then Commissioner Robinson, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I stopped him before you had a follow-up.
yeah, and I just wanted to emphasize what William had said in reference to working with the college, we have businesses in the Park of Commerce that can't fill job positions. I sit on the board for the BDB, and we have large corporations coming to Palm Beach County and or could come to Lake Worth, and they are looking to fill jobs. So if they come to the college and they're looking for a certain amount of people to fill a certain amount of jobs within 2 years once they come, they're not going to come if they don't feel. So all that needs to be in here, working together with the colleges. And then also, like Sacred Heart comes to mind. We need to make sure that we include Sacred Heart and other entities outside that box that may have, like Commissioner Hardy said, play space, green space, something that we can
And
work
that's
with.
why this has been changed to the educational element
Education,
versus
yeah.
just public schools.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Commissioner Robinson?
I was just wondering if we had a policy or school was notified for the last project on A Street, when the school board is notified, because I understood that there was a conflict of opinion as to the capacity for Highland. And if we could get closer to the,
Well, when developers are coming
Real
into the
truth.
city, they are encouraged to work with the school board, because they're actually, when it gets to a county and the permitting there, the school board is going to play a role. And so the difference of opinion appears to be what the school board administration over on Forest Hill Boulevard has to say about school capacity, and what possibly the principals and the teachers say about capacity in the schools. And there seems to be a distinct difference between those two entities.
So, do we have a policy to make sure that they're aware of the development that's going to impact the schools?
Yes, we do. It's part of the process and it's also part of that interlocal agreement
Okay.
that,
Okay.
there needs to be a coordination between the school's capacity and the development.
And just quickly, as part of education or involving the schools, I'm really interested in emphasizing our high school and looking forward to a homecoming celebration that encompasses the community and the school, which would further education, I think.
I like your thinking. Commissioner Hardy?
Yeah, I'd just like to get on the record that I'm very cautious about efforts to involve the school board in our decisions here. And it's not that I'm jealous of our sovereignty, but I do understand that there is, as William has mentioned, sometimes very stark differences of opinion between principals and other members of administrations at schools and folks at Forest Hill. And I don't want to have comments made by individual administrators who might not be as informed about the process to affect decisions that get made by boards in our community or frankly by this body. I think it's really, really important that we assert our independence in decisions that have to do with planning and development and things like that.
Yeah. Any more?
Yes.
One more.
The next element. And the last element or chapter, this is a new element in chapter, is the economic development. Many cities throughout Florida, they decide to incorporate elements because the thing is when you have this in part of your comprehensive plan, that's kind of give you, open an umbrella to apply for grants, to apply for different programs. So this economic development, if you look at all the policies that we added, and we work really close with community sustainability and with Dolores with regard to this element. Let me just, as we see in this slide, it's when we talk about economic element, economic development, future land use, transportation, and housing, they need to be aligned. And I will also say education, because, okay, there are openings. Commissioner just mentioned that there are job places here in the county that they are looking for to fill those places. Well, how are you going to attract that workforce to not only work in Lake Worth, but also to live in Lake Worth and to shop in Lake Worth? So many of those individuals, they are looking at the school system, where they are going to buy a home, where are, schools A-rated or where. So all of this needs to work together along with the economic development to attract and to grow the population in Lake Worth,
I just wanted to say thank you for adding economic development. I don't know why it wasn't in here earlier. Economic development's been around since someone created Earth. So
I'm surprised you asked that question. I think you know why it's not in there.
Yes, I'm merely making a statement for the record.
No.
So I'm very happy to see the economic development finally in here because it makes total sense. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And one of the goals and objective of the economic development is to diversify maintain and expand a diversified economy by encouraging growth in target cluster industries that provide employment and complement changing economic conditions. So, as you mentioned, there are job openings. So we are trying through this comprehensive plan to set the policies. We are proposing objectives and goals that will expand the economic base of the city of Lake Worth.
We still have to have the transportation and the parking.
We have to have everything.
And also, it's extremely important when we think about economic development is to recognize where is the redevelopment areas. I mean, remember, increased density, transportation, diversify your housing supply, improve your education system. All of that need to work together to promote this economic development. And here we are, the summary. So as you saw, all these different chapters or elements are supporting renewable energy. We are also encouraging green development and redevelopment. We are encouraging higher densities, increased parks and open space. I'm really happy to hear that the discussion with regard to park and open space, I mean, we really had the opportunity to exchange ideas, to listen to your input. I think we are going on the right track. Make us, all the team, we feel good about it. So that's a good thing. Adopt sea level rise strategies, as we talk on our coastal management chapter. And promote wide opportunities. So we also talk about housing, and we listen your ideas, we listen your concerns, and I think the proposed comprehensive plan have captured that sentiment. I mean, we are very much emphasizing to propose diversity in housing supply. We also talk about the different neighborhoods, how important it is to have neighborhood plans, and enhance and stabilize neighborhoods. Encourage complete streets, which you already have. You know, most of the Lake Worth already is improving their sidewalks. It's already, there's a lot of things happening here now. I always hear, oh, Lake Worth has so much potential. I think Lake Worth is happening now. So it's not a future, it's now. So
Can I kiss you?
I think we all want to kiss you.
So we talk about preserving our neighborhoods, encourage sustainable practice. This is just a summary of all the principles that throughout these elements or chapters. And I think it's extremely important to stimulate a vibrant economy. All those future land use, housing, education, everything is geared toward that, encouraging and supporting a vibrant economy. And always in Lake Worth, it's extremely important to facilitate and embrace public participation.
Commissioner Robinson?
And this is summary, or I don't know when, there were two things that I wanted sort of answered tonight in terms of historic preservation, and maybe it's to the attorney, but the definition of guidelines or the explanation of what historic preservation uses as guidelines. And then I have one other question.
You want to hear the next steps, the timeline first, and then we'll see if
Okay.
Oh, okay.
comes
There
next.
is one more slide
I'm sorry.
that will talk about the next steps. Okay, so this is, like we mentioned at the beginning, our fourth workshop, 2 with the boards and 2 with the city commission. So the next step we are looking forward is to start the local planning agency, LPA, hearing. We are planning to have that in November. We have 2 dates already, one for the PNC, another with the historic board. So, and then this plan, all updated, like I mentioned at the beginning, you will have 2 large documents will come in front of you in December for the transmittal hearing. So after the council approve the transmittal, so we can transmit to the state, to the Department of Economic Opportunities. Once we transmit to the state will take 60 days to provide us their famous ORC, which is the objection, recommendation, and comments report. Usually the state takes their time to read and to ask questions, clarifications, you know. So once we receive that, then they will go again. There is always sometimes a little bit of back and forth with the state, which is totally normal for clarification purpose. And then it comes again in front of the commission for final adoption. And then we transmit again to the state. So that's the next step. These are like a summary of the next steps.
Okay, thank you so much. Did you want to answer Commissioner Robinson's question about the historic portion?
I can try to address it. The comp plan sets, as Neil says, use the analogy, an umbrella that has been reiterated in my head since I first got involved with Lake Worth, that our unique historic architectural heritage is important to the city. And that's incorporated in the comp plan, that we find it important, that we want to preserve that unique character and heritage. The comp plan sets the mechanism to adopt a historic preservation ordinance in essence. I think Pamela can address when the preservation ordinance is going to come back from the state and when we'll have it scheduled for you to amend it based on the feedback we've gotten for the past couple of years. And based on my understanding so far, that ordinance is totally in compliance with the comp plan and the goals and objectives there and is not in conflict with it. The guidelines, our design guidelines, are tools to help build advocacy, understanding, and awareness on how to implement the land development code as it relates to the historic preservation districts. And that's how the three fit together.
Pamela, can you translate that?
I was gonna say, I'm sorry.
What's your question? Let me try, because I'm not the
Well,
preservation person, so I
do we adhere to a guideline by law, or do we use it as a guideline in terms of a direction that we want to go? It's historic preservation is becoming an issue,
right.
and I want to preserve it and make it
Right.
user friendly.
Well, I heard from the state on Friday and got confirmation from the gentleman who sent me back the changes from his boss yesterday. So I'm happy to report that they are very pleased with some of the changes that we've made in the ordinance. They, I'll say they gave in on many things. And you'll get a copy of it very soon. But one of the things that they emphasized in my conversations with them is that we need the design guidelines. We don't have them. Staff right now just received the responses to an RFP, so we're moving forward with that. But your design guidelines are there to really help. It's there to be specific, and you can make it as detailed or as loose as you want it to be. But it should help staff, and it should help the commission, and it should help the boards, and it should help your citizens understand exactly what is required of them. And right now, we just have a very general ordinance, which leaves a lot to be interpreted.
Yeah.
I don't want to use that word arbitrary, but it leaves it open.
So the word guidelines is nothing more than a word to help
It's absolutely,
our historic preservation
Yes.
department.
yes. And your citizens, so they will know exactly what is expected of them.
But it's not a legal word that has to be followed to the extent
No, but we are going to draft some guidelines that will be used in conjunction with the ordinance. So the ordinance might make a general statement. You have to have, if you can have hurricane impact windows, and then your guidelines will discuss what types of windows. It'll have illustrations in it so that your constituents will know, okay, these are the type of windows that I can put into my house. Right now,
Amen.
they don't have that. That does not exist. And your guidelines are supposed to be there to help them with that. And they're illustrations. They're not hard and fast rules.
thank you.
And you will approve the guidelines. It's not like it's something that staff gets to implement without.
They are adopted by ordinance and then are referenced in the design, in the LDRs as a supplemental document.
And that's when we get to address roofs, windows, fences.
Well, you're gonna address part of it with the ordinance changes that are
Correct.
coming up soon, And then you're going to further clarify that and update it even more with the design guidelines.
Right.
Soon.
Well, as fast as
Yes,
the
the
consultant can
ordinance,
write.
they approved our modifications in the ordinance to, roofs and non-contributing properties versus contributing properties, and, you know, whether or not you have to make changes. Okay, go ahead.
Follow up.
Thank you. And you know, we don't want to belabor this, but the districts, the historic districts, is that an essential part of the comp plan? Or I mean, why don't we have a historic community or a district as one rather than 6? And because it's in the comp plan that each one of our neighborhoods
right.
has the ability to vote and affect what they want in their neighborhood.
No, the neighborhood, you're getting things a little muddled. The neighborhood program is a way for the neighborhood to work with the city to identify what types of things they would like to see to enhance, build property values, stabilize, remove blight, improve appearance in a neighborhood. It may include a request from a community we feel in the future will be a historic district. When we set out to develop the land development regulations, we talked about that in essence, the city of Lake Worth, east of 95, is a historic city. There are within that historic city, there are areas that have been identified as being a little more special, and they were identified and designated as historic districts. And that was done long before I got here and long before most of us were on the board except for Mr. Maxwell. And those have been around now for almost 20 years.
So it's his fault.
I voted against it, for the record, again.
And so we are trying to further build support as well as clarify how it's implemented with the ordinance changes and then subsequently the design guidelines.
I just want to clarify, please keep in mind that the comprehensive plan is broad, has broad policies. It doesn't have like a design guidelines. Those are more for the land development regulation level. So the comprehensive plan just has general goals, objectives,
Thank
and
you.
policies. So it doesn't go into that level of detail.
All right. Did you hear that, everyone? That last comment that she made? Thank you. Mr. Alonso, do you have anything to add that's not part of that?
Yeah, and it doesn't always work that way, unfortunately. But so if I heard you right, and I just heard this a couple weeks ago, I just want for clarification. East of 95 is historic designation, or how did you
No,
word it?
what I
No,
said is that the area east of 95 is the historic context of Lake Worth.
Yes.
Okay.
If 95 had not been built, we might be having a conversation that it might all go all the way to Lake Osborne, but 95 took out a large portion of Lake Worth from what I can understand and looking at its typology and its platting. But the area east of 95 is the historic center of Lake Worth.
Okay.
But not to be confused with historically designated districts.
Right.
No, but
Okay,
that's
he's trying to give you a chronological evolution of the history by using that term.
and I totally understand
Yes.
that, but the
You might-
question I get, I represent a historic district, and they want to know why their district is historic and the west side's not. Not that I want to make the west side historic, but I argue that, you know, I sit on some of the meetings, and some of the houses on the west side that you can do anything you want with, and then
Well, the difference
that you
between
can't.
the two is that in the eastern area of the city, there are collections of properties that are 50 years old or older that are considered historic that as a group provide a complement and support of an original neighborhood. The context west of Dixie Highway has been so modified. There may be some historic houses there, here and there, but there's not a context that can support the designation of an historic district. If anybody, as a property owner, would like to have their property designated as an individual site west of Dixie Highway, that could be entertained and brought to you for consideration. But as it is right now, from the surveys that I've seen and how much either demolition that was done over the past 20 years or inappropriate infill or whatever you want to call it, there is not a context supportive of a historic district right now west of Dixie Highway.
And that leads me to my question, Pam. You had mentioned contributing and non-contributing. we need to be very clear, because I have heard staff say, well, it's non-contributing, however, it could have had, it should have had, it had, but we can't find it, and then it becomes contributing, because staff has made it contributing.
No,
And
staff
that's-
can't do that.
Well, it's happened where staff has said, you know, it's now contributing. And also, we had talked about, you know, as they get older, they become contributing. Is that not
No,
true?
it doesn't happen automatically.
Okay, because that,
The
was-
survey that we're doing is identifying there are
Correct.
properties that are contributing now that really shouldn't be.
okay,
There are properties that are non-contributing now that would qualify to be contributing. But the only way under our ordinance to change a property from non-contributing to contributing is a redesignation or an amendment to the original designating ordinance. Now, what our ordinance that we've sent to the state does have in it is that if you're the owner of a non-contributing property that through a survey identifies it as being eligible to be contributing, you can voluntarily request the Preservation Board and you to move their property, their own property, from non-contributing to contributing, because there are benefits to being a contributing property in a historic district, that there are several people waiting and hoping that they can become a contributing property so they can make substantial improvements to their property, either for the ad valorem property tax freeze or to get exemptions from FEMA or exemptions from the building code, which otherwise they would not be able to take advantage of because their property is non-contributing.
okay. I just want to make it clear, because there's been a lot of different conversations.
Okay, we all good?
Thank you.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
She had something.
You had something else?
I just wanted to say thank you so much to each of you for supporting this contract amendment process. It's extremely important. We've been through all these chapters and we feel like you truly understand what we are trying to accomplish.
Thank you.
So thank you so much to all of you.
Nice job. Thank you very much, appreciate it. I had a motion to adjourn, it was made by the vice
Seconded.
mayor and it was seconded by Commissioner Amoroso at first. So all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, motion is unanimous, thanks.
Just